Awesome. Thank you all for being here. I'm excited to have this conversation. So let's start just by, who are you? How did you get where you are today? What do you do and how did you get where you are today? Anna.
I'll go first. Oh, okay, I'll go first. So I fell into this interesting opportunity a couple decades ago. Started off originally in animation, and then I'm an autodidact, self-taught myself, basically everything I know today, and now have basically led discussions at Stanford D School and Berkeley Haas, but I lead a global team that's electrical, mechanical, industrial, UX designers as we build products for the future for the blended home. And I've had the fortuitous opportunity to work at Samsung now, who's amazing and has embraced me with their new initiative around diversity and inclusion as one of the few female global leaders that are leading this new drive inside of the company. Prior to that, I led my own 2 hardware startups. And before that, I was at Sony, where I was part of the lead design team for PlayStation 4, along with the Xperia platform. And before that, Theranos, and before that, Apple, and before that, Adobe, and then Macromedia. So it's been an interesting ride.
I'm Jewell Parkinson, and I'm responsible for human resources at SAP North America. And how I got there, I have a rather non-traditional career path, I would say, in that I've been with SAP for a number of years, almost 20. But it has never felt like I've been actually with the same organization, with the exception of its basic culture. So I started out interning. As an intern, I'm from the city of Philadelphia initially, and I had the opportunity to intern with a company called Inroads, and they basically provided an entree for me into corporate America at the time. I interned with the company Arco Chemical, subsequently worked for them full-time, and then in the late 90s decided to make a move to technology, and I started with SAP. Throughout the past 19 years, I've had a number of opportunities within the company. It's never felt like one job, just more like an extension of multiple opportunities to learn different parts of the business, different parts of the world, and have the opportunity to network with different people. 2 years ago, I assumed my current responsibility across the US and Canada, and it's a blast. It's never a dull moment. So always learning, always growing, always being challenged.
We don't have to go in order, but Yumi, go.
Okay. Hello, my name is Yumi Clark, and I am the Vice President of New Product Development in the small business space at Capital One. I've been there for about a couple of years. How I got started in technology, actually I'm a liberal arts major. I started off majoring in rhetoric and East Asian studies, so totally outside of the realm of engineering and computer science. I got into tech because I speak Japanese fluently, and one of my first jobs after studying law in Japan was working in a Japanese game company that was trying to break into the US market. And so from there, I did translation. One thing led to another. I've taken a whole bunch of different tech jobs, ranging from PayPal, eBay, Adobe, Autodesk, a number of different startups. And through that, I've realized that I love, love, love new product development, and that's what I do today.
Awesome. I'm Heather Gordon-Friedland. I am the Chief Product Officer at Glassdoor, which is one of the world's largest and fastest growing job boards and career websites. I started in my career very early on while I was an undergrad. I was a communications major undergrad, so similar. I didn't come from an engineering background. But I started working at a startup, and this is before the internet industry was a thing and before it was an industry. And I got very excited about it, tried to do as much work for free or for pay that I could do related to the industry, and learned very quickly I needed to go hone in my skills by listening and learning alongside my engineers. And so in my startup days, learned on the job and then took coursework on the side in engineering college to try and enhance my skill set. And by the end of my senior year of school, we got acquired by Microsoft. And so I kind of took my skills and my team and the people I loved working with, and we all relocated to the West Coast. And we started working out of the Microsoft office in the Silicon Valley. And so I had a chance to work at MSN in the very early days when Hotmail was the world's largest email service provider, and had a chance to build calendaring and contacts and synchronization technologies that help people connect better online. I pivoted in the latter part of my career at Microsoft to start building teams around search. and so had a lot of great experience working on the Bing search engine that you know today, and wound up leaving for eBay. And so I also had a great run at eBay. I spent 6 years at eBay, where I ran the buying experience from a product perspective, then the selling experience, and then finally I landed at Glassdoor about a year ago. And I'm just really excited to be here to share it with you today. But one of the really great things that I love about Glassdoor is that we're building technology that enables people to better empower them with information. And so we launched a tool about a week ago that we think is going to help people with regard to gender pay issues. As we all know, there is a gender gap. And it's called Know Your Worth. It helps you have a personal salary calculation service where you can come in and get a sense of what you should be paid in the open job market today. So I'm excited to share that with all of you.
Awesome. I'm going to go off script because that drove me to think about something that comes up often, which is, as a woman in tech or as an underrepresented person in tech, often we find that we are alone in our organizations and in the role that we play, and end up feeling the need to advocate for others to be in that leadership position, to rise up with us. And there are some negative effects that studies show around a woman advocating for other women in a company, where it can actually negatively affect your salary, it can negatively affect your career trajectory. How do you grapple with that? Are you advocates for other women, and how do you deal with this other side of the kind of not so fun side of it may be negatively impacting your career?
One of the things that we're trying to do is really address this systemically at a cultural level. We're looking at how do we adapt the culture where it becomes not only acceptable, but it becomes encouraged that everyone advocate for themselves. And what we found is that in order to do that, we want to be able to educate and enable, and then to really be in the position to role model individuals who come out and advocate. That's a positive thing. That's met with recognition. It's met with reward. So we're opening up, like we say, you have an open door policy. Well, we're expanding our culture to say we have an open door policy on self-advocacy. This is what it means. We want to be fully transparent in the case of salaries, what your salary range is. This is how you can position yourself. We're educating not only employees, women in particular, but also our hiring managers, our leaders, because oftentimes they don't have the level of competence around some of these issues, and they're tasked with making very important decisions relative to pay. So we've taken the approach of enablement, we're changing the culture, we're welcoming a culture of advocacy, and we're trying to empower individuals to be more accountable. And also providing support, because everyone doesn't get there at the same pace. So if you need additional support, then our organization is there to be able to provide it. So it's a change for sure, but we recognize that all people want to be empowered to champion themselves, their skills, and be able to advocate for themselves.
To build upon what you just said, from my perspective, it's looking at being an advocate for the individual candidates that are coming in. And a lot of cases, in particular, my area of expertise, there's evidence that can be presented. There's portfolio work, there's projects, there's customer adaptation, understanding, appreciation, sales metric data. But really, it's working with our HR partner. And I think a lot of the historical management comes from a biased perspective that is, well, at my last company or at my last role, I hired X candidate, whether it be male or female, for this particular amount of salary and this amount of expertise, versus let's educate them on S-band, let's educate them on Radford ranking levels, where that sort of, I think, baseline resets everything. Now, I know Radford and S-band is kind of HR taboo. We're not supposed to be talking about that, but I think everyone needs to know this, because you can take your Radford and your S-band to any company in the world and know what you're worth, regardless of whatever gender you are. That's really important, but it starts with educating the managerial staff and the hiring staff to do that.
I'm in an interesting spot right now because we're going through year-end reviews at work. And I've been reading a lot of the current research that's out there. Most recently, there's been a Lean In study that came out that was, I think, co-published with McKinsey. And they talked about this, where the women that have asked are perceived to be more aggressive and actually 30% less liked I think that was the quote as part of that. I see this as being one of those things where you think globally but act locally, because that ask and that request is a very personal issue. And then being able to ask that question, a couple of the women that actually work for me came up to me and says, I, think if I've been doing a good job. I believe that I should get rated higher than normal. How do you feel about that, Yumi? And the conversation was one where we talked about her projects and talked about how well she was doing. And what she did was she gave herself an in by talking about all the different projects she was doing without asking necessarily, I know what she's asking me, but it wasn't the ask that was completely direct, because she knows that asking directly would be too aggressive in some cases, depending on the manager. I was okay with it, but the way she did it was actually really nicely done, and I haven't forgotten about it. And when I think about her, I'm like, you know what, that was actually a nice kind of best practice for me as I think about when I advocate for myself as well.
Do you all feel a responsibility to other women in tech to help them rise?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially as we sort of, move beyond what gender means. And for myself, it's educating, it's informing, it's mentoring. A big part of my career has been like going out to individuals and helping mentor them internally within my own organization. But I also take on a lot of external mentorship. And there was a speaker from 500 earlier today that she was talking about, if you come and approach me like, will you be my mentor? She's like, absolutely not. However, if you come to me with a question like, I'm struggling with this issue, I notice, Anna, that you've done X, Y, and Z. How did you do that? And then I'll be like, I'm happy to mentor you. I'm happy to provide you some of that time to help guide you, whether it's venture capital raising, whether it's product design, and it's just guidance and sort of showing by leadership, I think.
I absolutely think it's a critical part of our roles to support women in technology. I think half of the support that I find that women reach out to me for is just understanding how they can help themselves, how they can build their own network, what they need to be doing, and they look to me for context. And so something that I found I've been able to really provide them with is the managerial perspective, or to help them think through a scenario that they're dealing with, and to just feel like there's a very comfortable open door where I'm not going to judge. This is a mentorship relationship, and that they can come asking for feedback. And for me as a manager, I find it hugely valuable because it helps me round out my thinking, and it helps me better understand the different situations that people are coming against, and I can be more open-minded and more aware and more proactive perhaps even in how I can reach out and make the environment feel really inclusive of all people, regardless of level, diversity, their background, their skills, their strengths, their experiences. Diversity and their experiences in the workplace happen in so many different ways, and I think you need to be kind of all-knowing and all open to all those different forms happening at the same time, and providing a workplace where people feel really comfortable bringing their best selves to work.
On that one, my thinking has really changed over the years. And before, I would strictly focus on like younger folks that are working, perhaps female, people of color. As I've gotten older, actually my thinking has really evolved, and I've been really thinking about the community, because you need to have allies, whether you're a minority or not, because it's not like I'm in this space all the time, even in my group, where I can call something out, and it's other people that can also call things out as well. So I equally mentor men or women, people of color or not, gender. I don't necessarily look at that, because the questions are coming from both sides of the aisle, and to be able to address that openly and honestly and describe how it feels to be an Asian woman and they've never experienced it is also, I think, an asset. And then also helping those people that are feeling like they're a little bit disadvantaged go through their process by the experiences I've had is also equally important.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It makes me think about intersectionality, and that most of us on the panel have more than one kind of underrepresented group that we're representing, right? How much does that play a role in how you think about yourselves, and how does it play a role in how others see you as leaders?
I'm pretty complex. So I'm Mexican, I'm Swedish, I'm Danish, but I grew up in Japan. I actually see myself as probably more Japanese than American. And so that adds a whole nother level of complexity to what I am now. But it's being open and understanding like the cultural complexities that Yumi talked about. I mean, it's difficult. We've got, experience. We've got, what they're bringing to the table. But there's also the cultural aspect that is outside of whether or not you're a woman or a man or whatever. The cultural aspect is how we enable our chemistry. We were just having a conversation backstage about chemistry being really critical to a team. If you have bad chemistry within a team, that will destroy the entire team. And that's just kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it plays a very big role, and actually I really embrace that. It's one where, I'm black, I'm a female, I'm an executive at a multinational company of 80,000 employees, and I take that with a lot of pride and responsibility. And what I find in my role in particular is I like to be able to serve as a role model, an example. I'm constantly learning from the employees and our partners and our customers, and look to also provide insight for others that if this is what you aspire to do or whatever you aspire to do, you can do it. And I think it's very important, particularly in organizations at the executive level, for people to be able to see themselves in others. And also, even if you aren't, physically someone else, that you have enough empathy and shared experience with others that they can come to you. So as an example, right now I'm sponsoring a colleague who is a 53-year-old white male. And I'm sponsoring him in terms of his next career step, because at times, sometimes he feels marginalized because a lot of the buzzwords sometimes in the organization is more around our earlier talents or our millennials. So being at the other end, or not even the other end, but another of the 5 generations we have in the workforce, he's also looking for advocacy. So, I think it's just very important. You never know where the roads intersect, and you never know what individuals are looking for you for, feedback, that they can come to you in a trusted way.
And one more question along this path is, a lot of tech companies, actually, when we first started our conference, as we were trying to engage tech companies, a lot of tech companies actually told us they weren't ready to talk about diversity, they were only focused on women. Do you think the conversation is changing, and do you see yourselves as part of maybe even the responsibility again of really broadening what diversity is and in your companies and really making it more inclusive?
Building product, designing product these days, you have to look to the global market space. You have to get into the insights that may be regional from an ethnographic perspective. And myself as being one of the few global female executives in Samsung, I think we're taking that with pride. I think that we're looking at how do we expand market share, how do we move into new areas within the home. We call it the blended home. And we're doing this with tenacity. We're doing this with immense pride of opening it out of the opening it up outside of the traditional context of, what the traditional television demographic of North America looks like. We're looking at Europe. So Seraph, one of our wonderful products that we launched in Europe first, designed with the Brobick brothers, is an amazing furniture-forward, lifestyle, very feminine product. That is incredibly well received. You can see this inside of the MoMA Museum here in America. And that's my perspective, and we need a lot more of that as we move into the kitchen, as we move into the bathroom, as we move into the bedroom of future connected experiences, curated experiences that we want to have surrounding our lives. It's just very important. We have to have that femininity, that sort of that instinct to be able to design and create for, and not just leave it up to traditional demographics.
I have a follow-up. When I think about just diversity itself, this is going to sound kind of weird, but I don't really think of myself that way. And at work, and I think others see me that way, though. And so because of it, I've realized that kind of to what you were talking about, Jewell, that I feel like I do have to be a bit of a role model in that aspect. The conversation at work with us with regards to technology has really changed, and diversity has really changed. If you look at the types of people that are being hired, and you think about the differences that causes because of the types of people that are being hired now, causes misunderstandings and assumptions to be made. There's a new program at our work where we have, they're calling it Integral Learning Matters. It's a diversity program, in effect, to help with those conversations. And as an executive, what we're doing now is, from those learnings, we have a common language to address it when we see it. And so when you see, for example, the woman who is not talking, she may not feel comfortable talking, or she's holding back because women typically jump in when there's a little bit of a gap in the conversation. We notice that and we say, hey, she hasn't spoke. Are you comfortable in speaking right now? And would you like to say something? And we give her that opportunity because of the learnings that we had through this training program. And it's not that other people have not gone through different training programs, but it's that language that brings us together so that we can call each other on it, which is really cool. And the types of diversity programs that we have are at different levels at work. So not only do we have that, but we also have inclusion groups, so that sometimes you just need to have that conversation with a certain set of people. And that conversation is not meant to be exclusionary, but it's also to kind of form those kind of thoughts together to kind of understand it better, and then also to share those with others. And so we're doing a lot of these different types of programs right now.
Yeah, I think, when it comes to being more inclusive in the workplace, I think about the power of the platform that I represent as being a product leader. Like Glassdoor provides this amazing set of data by people that are average, just like us, where you can share what it's really like to work somewhere in an anonymous, safe way. And you can share your salary, you can talk about what it's really like to work on your team. It's incredibly empowering information. And you think about what that's like inside the culture of Glassdoor, it's very much similar to how we run ourselves as a company. And so transparency, having your voice be heard, being direct, being honest, these are part of our values. And it's definitely represented in the way we run our company. It's represented in who we are. And I try and remind myself that because it needs to be in how we build our product. And so if I hear or I see somebody in the room who I know has an opinion on a particular topic getting quiet, or if I know that there are certain personalities that tend to be quieter, sometimes they're women, sometimes they're men, I will call on them and I will say, do you have something you want to add to this conversation? Because one of my skills is EQ and perception, and so I can kind of read the room, and I'll try and draw that out from them because I want them to participate in ways that they're going to feel comfortable and empowered, even if they're not sure if that's their moment to do it. And so I try and be really in tune with the needs of the individual and knowing what they're capable of and bringing them into conversations so that they can contribute their piece. Sometimes I've also said, hey, let's take this conversation offline so we can do a little bit more homework about it, because I realize that sometimes people don't feel comfortable in the moment, but if they give themselves a chance to think about it and gather a little bit of that research behind the scenes, they'll come back with a well-groomed opinion. And sometimes people need a little bit of space to do that. And I think part of that is creating an inclusive environment and being really aware of the decisions you're making, how you're making them, and who do you want to participate in that, and making that feel inclusive to the way they work.
Yeah, one of the other aspects, just from a diversity and inclusion perspective, we're also looking at it from a technology standpoint and a product perspective. We have a campaign right now called Business Beyond Bias, and at the root of this is looking at, in particular, technology and how you can leverage machine learning in order to help root out and prevent and hopefully eradicate unconscious bias throughout what we call the talent life cycle. So if you look at the recruitment cycle, for example, oftentimes, we all know, we all may see this, that in certain job descriptions, the type of language that those job descriptions have are oftentimes gender biased, for example. So we're striving to have gender neutrality in job profiles and actually using technology that can pick out those words and give you alternative words that you can use. And what we've done in terms of the pilot is we've seen that those job profiles, where we have made more gender neutral in terms of language, that we've seen an increase in the percentage, in this instance, of women who apply for those jobs by 25%. So that's just an example, and there's many other possibilities from a technology standpoint. We're using the latest and greatest, in this case, machine learning, of course, predictive analytics, where you can really start to understand where the bias takes place in the decision, and then provide the decision maker alternatives to make, hopefully a better, fair, equal decision.
Is that technology you're going to make available outside of SAP?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're also working with our employee resource groups for their perspective in how we're developing that technology. So I think that's taking it to another level as well, to make sure that the individuals that are giving insight into the design, the user interface, are also individuals who are best informed as to how we should be shaping that.
Awesome. Can you give us, earlier when I was introducing you and kind of killing time before the panel, I talked a little bit about one of the obstacles that I overcame as an executive. I was in a place that was not inclusive, and what's great about it is the result is all of this that we've built. I left that position, and I ended up really finding a space where I thrive, and I'm bringing people together to talk about and to create change. So out of these deep, dark places can be amazing results, amazing changes. Can you, each of you, talk about a time where you came up against a barrier in your career and how you overcame that?
Well, one thing, I'll just start off and be fully transparent, which is the way I normally operate. In terms of a barrier that I faced, was more of an internal challenge on myself. There's lots of external barriers for sure, but when I was pursuing this role that I'm currently in, initially I did not put my name in for it. I was very reluctant. I thought that I was not yet fully qualified to apply for the job. And then research will also tell you, typically, sometimes this is a gender dimension too, where women may feel they need 100% meet 100% of the job criteria in order to feel comfortable coming forward, whereas men oftentimes about 50-60% of the criteria, and they have more of the internal fortitude to go forward for the job. So I actually found myself in that exact situation, and thankful for me how I was able to overcome that obstacle, because I would have missed the opportunity. I was ready, I was prepared, I had all the experience, I had the performance track record, I had the network, I had everything that you needed to be in the job. But there was still something within me that wasn't bringing me there. And I got over that obstacle, thankfully, with the help of other executive sponsors, people who were mentors and people who knew me and had, essentially given me the feedback, encouragement, and coaching to pursue the opportunity, and I thankfully eventually got it. But I consider that an obstacle, because that was almost a self-imposed barrier that I had to overcome.
Don't you think that, I think for all of us up here, that those self-imposed barriers, we put them upon ourselves, but every step of our challenges throughout our professional careers, I think we've all faced them. And I know I was giving a talk earlier today in the solo stage, and I kind of approach each of these challenges, regardless whatever it is, whether it's personal, whether it's project, it's just embracing that fear. Like you said, not having sort of the initial go forward, just embrace that fear and be relentless, with tenacity and unwavering grit. And, that gets you through a lot, actually. It's gotten me through a lot in my life and a lot in my career, a lot in my family. So, I mean, that's kind of my share out to everyone.
Okay. So my obstacle, I don't think that I got over it myself. It was when I had my second child and I went back to work and I was still leading a pretty big team. And so everybody expected that I was still kind of on the same path, which I was kind of. But when you first go back after maternity leave, I was just asleep at the wheel a lot of the time. It was just physically demanding to be in that spot. And how I overcame that obstacle was actually through my team. My manager was super, super supportive, and my team really leaned in to help me out because I had to get back into the swing of things. And oftentimes you'll hear a lot of advice. Don't take particularly for women, don't take yourself out before something happens. Just lean in, keep on going. I agree with that, but there's also consequences to that. And being able to understand those consequences, I didn't fully understand what that actually meant, I think. And now, whether it's somebody that's on maternity leave or has bereavement or has some kind of personal issue, my hope is that I have the ability to give them space and create a team where actually people are supporting them in the same way that I got supported. And I also noticed that when that actually happens, I actually still think about that manager for me, and in a heartbeat, I would do anything for that man. And those are the types of people I think that I strive to be. And I think in a career, looking for somebody that can support you as well is one of the key things about that whole work-life balance and thinking about the career. And I didn't really think about that before, but that's the obstacle that I overcame, and I want to give that opportunity for others and kind of pay it forward with everybody else that I see as well.
I'm reflecting and hearing so many great thoughts from all of you. The one that comes to mind for me is early on in my career, I mentioned I don't come from an engineering background. I think my own fear around that was a huge obstacle for me at first. Trying to figure out and hone in and understand what I would do to overcome that, I worked my butt off. I just worked so hard. I tried to spend as much time as I could with engineers to learn from them, to absorb, like osmosis, like they were going to teach me. And through all of that hands-on learning and the amazing people I had a chance to kind of partner with and to learn from, what I realized was that actually my weaknesses turned into my strengths in those conversations. I looked at problems differently than them. I looked at it from the business perspective, from the user experience perspective, and I was really trying to hone in on, but what's actually important for us to deliver to a customer right now? And I kept bringing that back into the conversation. What they were able to problem solve around was, how is this thing going to be built? And I could keep countering that with, but what are we actually trying to achieve? And how do we do this in the best way possible together? And over the course of my career, that EQ, that perception, that empathy for customers has turned into my strength. But way early on, I thought of that as a complete weakness. I didn't even realize that that was going to be my strength. And so perhaps it was a fear of failure that helped motivate me through it, but really trying to uncover and discover what I could bring to those conversations that would be highly valuable to what we're trying to solve as a business became that piece that was unlocked for me.
And when you think back to that time that you all shared, is there something that someone could have told you, or what would you have wished to tell yourself now? Actually, what would you tell yourself now to help get you through that, so that you can share that?
I don't know. For me, it's been trust my gut. Whenever throughout my career I've ever second-guessed myself, hands down, I was wrong in second-guessing myself. I think when it comes down to it, you've got phenomenal intuition, go with it. Chances are you're never going to second-guess yourself if you follow your intuition. You're only going to second-guess yourself if you don't. So for me, finally having confidence that my intuition was right, it took me a while to get there. But now I look back on it, and anytime I've got doubt in myself, I'm like, wait a second, I've never, ever, ever regretted following my intuition. So following your gut, that would be my advice.
And I would say embrace being uncomfortable, because that's when you really know that you're growing or that you're about to venture on a journey for growth. And initially, I didn't think about it that way. I feared being out of my comfort zone, but now I really embrace opportunities to feel a bit uncomfortable, because that signals to me that I'm growing. And it also signals to me that I have an opportunity to be successful, and if I fail, sometimes it's okay. I can rebound, and then I can learn from that as well.
I would say figure out how to have impact. So before, much like Heather, I was trying to do everything, and I was trying to be successful at everything. I think I can still be successful, but I have to figure out how to be successful, and making sure that what I do is choiceful and considerate, and know that that's what is going to make something even better.
I guess lastly for me, one of my very close friends and mentors from Apple and from Sony, he gave me some great advice when we were developing PlayStation, where we had some issues with the team, and how I handled that issue internally. And he was, this is probably, seems the scariest moment in your entire career, your entire profession, your entire life most likely. But as you stand on the edge of that cliff, that vista, where just a false move, the false wrong direction of the wind that could blow towards you, they'll push you to your death. Embrace the beautiful views of the vista. Breathe it in, take it in. And that comes back to you saying, embrace your fear. That's lived with me for the past 10 years so far. So that's something I love to share with everyone. And I share that out to my friends, close friends. That email, I kept it. It's in my deep within my Gmail account, and I forward it on to people. So that's my parting advice.
And why is this work on inclusion important? Why is inclusion important in tech? How does it affect tech? How does it affect innovation?
It's not just tech, and that's something I was thinking about. This conference should not be only about tech. I want to see the food service here. I want to see the fashion industry here. I want to see the automotive industry here. It really needs this. It's about bringing insight, building product, and balance, making things that we want in our lives that don't end up at the top of the e-waste pile every 2 years. And you can only sort of develop that insight by having the right chemistry and the right sort of balance of individuals on a given team. And inclusiveness and diversity is core and heart to that. Otherwise, we'll end up in the era of product design, the product experiences of 30, 40 years ago. That just cannot happen.
And I think it's very important because we are, from a business perspective, it's important because we are in business and the market is very competitive. And in order to differentiate ourselves, we have to come to market with the best products. And in order to have the best products, you do need diverse perspectives across all spectrums: thought, geography, ethnicity, gender, generational. All of those add to a level of creativity and thought leadership that result in the kind of innovation that we want our products to embody, we want our people to embody. And you can't really get those ideas out there unless you're in an inclusive work environment where people know that they can show up, they can be their authentic selves, and people are listening to them and empathize with their situation. And also, it's what our customers expect. Our customers expect it, and now they demand it. And so that's something that we should actually embrace as an organization as society evolves due to globalization, due to technology, due to changing demographics all around us. So this is an opportunity that we see in terms of a business imperative.
There's actually been recent research done that actually shows that if you have females in high-ranking functions of companies, you will see like overall a $42 million value added to the business. And so that diversity, having diversity, there's this study I'm quoting right now is a Standard & Poor's. If you look at the 1,500 companies in Standard & Poor's right now, and you actually assess them based on the companies that have females in high-ranking positions in the company, you see it in the business value that's created. So I think, net, when it comes to diversity, diversity is not only important for the day-to-day work and for the outcome of your products. I agree with all of that completely because that's representative of your customer base, but then it also shows up in your business. And the quality of what you produce is, I think, going to be overall better for the market.
All right, I want to ask for a few questions from the audience. Does anyone have a question?
Ask us anything. I think it's cultural based. I think like we have here, my perspective in North America, a very myopic North American centric view, and guess what? There's a whole other side of our planet that's out there, and I think that's something we haven't gotten to. And as we think about centralization of organizations, once companies were abroad and they had satellite representation in Europe and in Asia and Latin America and in North America, I've seen a trend over the past 15 years where they've centralized everything back to the Valley or to America, North America in particular. And I think we need to reverse that. I think that it's okay and we can build new markets, build new channels if we like sort of fragment that out, and the conversation around culture is really important.
Yeah, and for those of you who didn't hear, the question was, what is the next step? Where do we go from here?
I think a piece of it is also around neurodiversity, and really as we look even beyond differently abled people, and for the past 25 years since the passage of the ADA, there's been a lot of discussion around people who may be physically disabled and how do we provide more equal access to opportunities in the workplace. And around the prospect of neurodiversity, really looking at those hidden talents and populations of people that are often underemployed, whether it's mental disabilities or in cases of depression, bipolar disorder, and autism as an example. So there's a number of different individuals who have tremendous strengths, gifts, that we want to take advantage of as well and give access to. So I think that's a part of the broader discussion. And then I think another next step is also being able to see the diversity be represented at all levels within an organization, particularly in the C-suite, in a more pervasive way than it is currently reflected across most industries.
I think I'm really interested in hearing the broader discussion. Oftentimes what happens is there's pockets of discussions that are happening, but no one outside of those discussions know that these discussions are there. And what I would really like to do is all of us, we've been talking about this for a long time, embrace those fears a little bit, share those stories with people. There's a lot of empathetic people that are out there too that are not of that particular group, whether it's gender or religion or any of those types of things. And connecting with people, because it's when that connection actually happens that things change. And I would love to see that just kind of spread either one by one or through policy, and it'd just be an amazing place that way.
I love the fact that your organization, Melinda, is called Change Catalyst, because I think, we all can be a catalyst for change in the world that we impact every day and the people around us. And so whether that's through storytelling, I think that's phenomenal. Like things I didn't talk about. I'm a mom with 2 young kids and I'm an executive on a tech startup. Like that's a big job and that can be a hard job some days. I try to talk about that. I'm not trying to hide it. I try and share it with my team because for somebody else out there, that story means something. Whether it means something today, tomorrow, the next day, I don't know. But I think we all can be the catalyst for change in the communities that we're in. And that is at work, that's at home, that's with your friends, it's with your communities. And you can start behaving and paying that forward and have open dialogues like this to help people realize that this is the way the future is going to be. Like we're going to move towards that future together. And so as you become leaders, or if you are in a leadership role right now, bring that forward, bring that home with you, and be that catalyst for change in the community you're in. That's the kind of impact that I think we can pass along by sharing stories like this.
Thank you for that question. We have a mic. Oh, back here.
Thank you for the great discussion. So in terms of branding and recruitment, what could a more old school, very large tech company do to attract women candidates for talent?
What industry?
Tech.
But in specifically what industry within tech?
Telecommunications.
Oh, okay, telco. Funny you mentioned that. I was just talking to a friend of mine that was also part of the Lesbians Who Tech trip to the Washington, D.C. movement to meet at the White House, and she's in telco. I think it's just, like if it's switches, if it's dealing with the electrical engineering side of telecommunications, if it's dealing with the DSP side, it's just trying to figure out what that sort of deep vertical is and going off, and it's about recruitment, I think, getting candidates early on. And raising them up and training them to basically be the next generation of leadership within your organization. I hate to use this analogy because it's a baseball analogy and I don't really like baseball, but we use this at Apple all the time. It's like you don't hire major league players, and I think this is true for the industry. You don't bring rock stars in because the rock stars will tend to disrupt and create negative culture. You bring the AAA, the AA, minor league players that are really passionate and hungry, and you train them and you raise them up within the ranks, and you get them to be inspired and motivated and passionate about what they're working on. And the telecommunications industry is so awesome right now, especially on the hardware side, just to geek out on it. I think you can easily find amazing candidates and talent out there, but start early on, start at the undergrad level, or even as they're just entering the undergrad level. Go out there to the universities and do that roadshow.
I think you can create networking within your company for like minds to connect. And you can create momentum and you can create opportunities for people to network and mentor each other. And so I think some of it kind of starts at home. I've been involved in many women in tech organizations throughout my career, and we're beginning to become more and more active within Glassdoor right now. And I'm making phenomenal connections with women across the company. And I think that's really important for them to have a place to share. And so with regard to any kind of minority, diversity, inclusion effort, I think step one starts at home, to create community for the people who are there already. Step two, I think having a really transparent work environment can be a challenge, but if you can embrace platforms or internal communication methods to do that, to be able to share stories, to be honest and open and direct, I think that does help as well, and it will slowly start to change a culture. If it's a very large company, though, I think another thing you can do, though, if you create these kind of communities within the company, is then network with companies outside who you would like to emulate or you would like to learn from, and create opportunities to kind of network across. And maybe that can help influence some of the cultural learnings and create a dialogue and a discussion for now, what do we do? Within your team, perhaps in partnership with an HR organization. So I think you can create momentum by coming to events like this, bringing that back with you, talking about what that means to others like you, and creating dialogue that feels fluid within the organization.
And last question.
Thank you. If we just look at Silicon Valley, Anita Borg Institute and other organizations have been working very hard to work with companies to help them diversify. The numbers are changing at a mercurial rate. I mean, it's snail's pace. It's just barely budging. So one of the things that people are looking at these days is, well, we have a white male culture who's running these companies. Why don't we engage the male allies? And I know that some people have talked about this a little bit at the conference in the last couple of days. So I'd love to hear from the panel, what are your thoughts about how we get more male allies? And once we've tapped into that, we've sort of got some kind of a methodology, how the heck do we accelerate it? Because I'd like to still see equality and really equality up and down companies in my lifetime. I was just at San Jose State a few weeks ago talking to a young female student, and she's heads up a club there, a science club, and one of the team members said to her, "Are you this bossy with your boyfriend?" Now imagine that young man goes into the workforce, he brings that attitude into the workforce, he becomes a manager, and once again, multiply that many times over, we've got these generations of young men who are still thinking the old way. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, go for it, Yumi.
So I've found that in my experience, the best way has been connecting on a problem and coming up with a mutual goal. And if there's a way that we can solve the problem together, that those people, regardless of whether they're male or female, have become my ally. And that's what I mean, like the empathy part is really important, because if you can establish that empathetic relationship, oftentimes there is a kind of broadening of that relationship, and they'll remember you for the different projects. Now the question is, how do you accelerate that? I think that's where, going into some of Heather's points that she was bringing up before, I think it can be a little bit institutionalized, meaning that if there are particular problems that need to be solved across the institution, you can start off with these little pockets, but you can bring them into the organizations in terms of the clubs that you might have or the networks that you might have in the organization. So you up-level the conversation then, and then it goes broader.
Yeah, one of the things that we also looked at is a program that we've instituted called Men Advocating Real Change. One of the things that we found is that many of our male colleagues want to be a part of the solution, and at times, while I might be generalizing here, have felt a bit excluded from some of the broader dialogue around diversity and, in some respects, inclusion. So a piece of it is really recognizing that this could be the view and being very explicit in terms of the role that men have to play, they must play, in order for us to advance and accelerate based on, whether it's demographic shifts happening in society, based on our own internal value system in terms of embracing differences and ensuring equality. They want to be a part of that solution. They also want to be invited to the table. And so that's what we're trying to do now more consciously, ensure that men are invited to the table on all topics, across all dimensions as well, so that they can be embraced in that way and also serve as role models as a part of the change.
Can I just mention one thing real quick? So we also have a Menace Allies program at work. The other thing that I've also seen, it's not a very enclosed conversation. So we also have coding camps for girls where parents, men and women, fathers and mothers, are bringing their children into work. And that's also another way of getting people to talk about those conversations as well.
One last thing I want to say. You talked about having a shared goal, a focused goal about this, making sure that they feel included. Well, I've seen that if you have an organization and you've instilled the OKR practice versus the KIP practice, that has a huge effect to it. But then also I take it to the individual level, whether you're a man or a woman or an individual contributor or a manager. I make everyone do a DISC assessment, so everyone has a proper framework and know how to communicate with one another, so there's no miscommunication. Because the problem is so often that I've seen outside of, I think, us women basically, is men don't know how to properly communicate with this bro culture attitude. And if you have a DISC assessment, you have keywords, you know where your block bands are, and you can have a more effective communication. And then I encourage all of my team to share their DISCs with one another. So if I'm going to go meet with you, Yumi, I know exactly how to effectively communicate with you. That's super helpful, and it's a rather cheap solution. It's like $39 to do a DISC assessment online. So I highly encourage that.
Great. Thank you all for having that conversation. I feel like we could go on for a long time, and we're just getting started. I'm going to ask you all to stay on stage for a minute as we announce the Startup Showcase winners, which will just take a few minutes. So if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to bring Wayne up to the stage as well. But
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.